Post tenebras lux, after darkness light. Hey, how's everyone doing? Am I coming in loud and clear? Yeah, that's the new intro. I slaved over it. Actually, I used my meager skills to put that together. I kind of like it. It's kind of simple. Hey, Carm. Oh, good. My sole moderator is here. My sole moderator, Carm, is in the building. All right. Well, as you can see, I made it back safe and sound from my trip. I was off in North Carolina where I was filling in for a church that's currently without a pastor. I preached on Sunday, both morning and evening. In the morning, I preached on John 1:15 through 17 on the fullness of Christ. And in the evening, I preached on John 1:18 on the exclusivity of Christ. So I had a fruitful experience. I was able to edify the Lord's people. And I'm excited to talk about today's topic. Now, I know I left you all on a bit of a cliffhanger. Last time was about 2 weeks ago. I think it was August 30th. I started this topic. And because it's been 2 weeks, let me quickly catch everyone up to speed. Hey, I guess I just see that Edward Dalcor is here. Oh, and pardon me, folks. I didn't say hello to everyone. I'm sort of reticent to do that because I might skip someone, but hello, Riaz. Hey, Slam. Hey, Pedro. Hey, Reasoned Answers. Carm. Jeremy. I Saw the Light. Fish for Fun. Revelation 22. Chloe Girl. Diego. Marion. Jeremy Wong. I hope I didn't forget anyone. I see Patriot there. Marion. Air Church. And of course, Dr. Dalcor. Dr. Dalcor is currently, like Carm, sucking up all the smoky air there in California where the fires are raging. Quite a predicament. Eddie sends me pictures occasionally of the red skies. So pray for California people. They're currently experiencing a lot of fires, and that means the air is not treating them well. All right, so I introduced this topic on August 30th, and if you watch that, you know what the catalyst for this was. I did a debate on Is Jesus the Angel of the Lord with a Unitarian named Solomon Ja Rodriguez. In that debate, he argued that Jesus is not the angel of the Lord, and part of his argument, as strange as this seems as an argument, was that Jesus is a descendant of David. And in his mind, if the one, then not the other. In other words, if Jesus was a descendant of David, then he couldn't be the one spoken of under the Old Covenant as the angel of the Lord, who is routinely identified as a divine theophany, an appearance of God, because, of course, the word angel, as I have repeatedly reminded people, is not an ontological term, it's a functional term. It refers to anyone who speaks a message, anyone who's serving in a revelatory capacity. For that reason, the word can be used for human beings, whether they're bringing a message from another human being or from God. It can be used to refer to angelic creatures, and it can also be used for God. For example, in Malachi 3:1, the Lord, Ha-Adon, an exclusively divine title, is referred to as V'melach Ha-Barit, which means the angel of the covenant. In fact, John the Baptist and Jesus are both called messengers by virtue of the fact that Malachi 3:1, which speaks of one messenger preparing the way for the other, right? One messenger is heralding the coming of the other, who's called Ha-Adon, the Lord, the messenger of the covenant. And in Mark chapter 1, that prophecy is applied to John the Baptist preparing the way for Jesus. The same thing is true in Matthew chapter 11. So when we look specifically in the Old Testament at the angel of the Lord, not angels in general, but the angel of the Lord, he's regularly identified as God. In Genesis 16:14, Moses said, she, referring to Hagar, who just spoke to and heard the angel of the Lord, Moses said, she gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. So Moses calls him the Lord, which is Jehovah. And then Hagar says, you are the God who sees me. So she calls him God. So that's the first occurrence or appearance of the angel of the Lord in the Old Testament. And from the get-go, he's identified as Jehovah, God. And that carries through all the rest of the Old Testament. Throughout the Old Testament, the angel of the Lord is identified as a divine person. It was that same divine person who appeared to Moses in Exodus 3. It was that same divine person who in Judges 2 says, I'm the one who swore to your forefathers, right? I'm the one who brought you out of the land of Egypt as I swore to your forefathers that I would never break my covenant with you. So here the angel of the Lord identifies himself at the time of the Judges as the one who delivered Israel from Egypt, just as he had promised earlier to the patriarchs. So throughout the Old Testament, the angel of the Lord is identified as God. Well, in response to Solomon, who argued that Jesus couldn't be the angel of the Lord because he was a descendant of David, I pointed out that ironically, even in those prophecies about the coming seed of David, he's identified as a divine person. For example, in Isaiah 9:7, it said that he would be seated on the throne of David. And just prior to that, in Isaiah 9:6, he's referred to as Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Father of eternity, or the possessor of eternity, the one who has that as one of his attributes. I could have also pointed to Jeremiah 23:6, where the branch of David is referred to as Yahweh Sidkenu, which means Jehovah, our righteousness. But one of the things that I brought up in response to this was the very interesting fact that in Genesis 4:1, if we translate it literally from the Hebrew, when Eve gave birth to Cain, she's in my mind, she's anticipating, and I'm going to argue some of this today, but she's anticipating the coming Messiah, and she believes that Cain, her firstborn son, is that promised one. And so she literally says, according to the Hebrew, I have acquired a man, the Lord. Okay, now this was something that came as a shock to many Unitarians. One Unitarian says this was surprising, that anybody would say this sort of thing. And I couldn't help but sort of chuckle, because I thought, stick around for a while. I'm full of surprises. If you're a Unitarian, you can expect to be surprised by the Word of God times without number. But Carlos Xavier, in particular, he's the son-in-law of Anthony Buzzard. Carlos Xavier scoffed at this, and he actually made a video on it. And this garnered a bunch of comments from Unitarians on Facebook and on his YouTube page, where Unitarians referred to this as novel, as surprising, as odd, as facile, as outlandish, and so on and so forth. So what I did last time was I basically showed that what's surprising to these guys is well known to scholars, right? Now, I'm not claiming every scholar agrees with me here. However, there's a good number of scholars who do agree with this interpretation. But I pointed out that while many modern translations do not render the verse this way, there are modern translations that do. And while there are many modern translations that don't render it this way, such as the Greek Septuagint and other things, there are ancient translations that do. However, what I did really emphasize last time, though, is I showed that scholars commenting on the Hebrew text in commentary after commentary, in one scholarly work after another, all, for the most part, all would grant that this is grammatically sound, right? But then they try and give reasons why this can't be accepted, and I'm going to talk about some of that today. But basically what I was trying to do was whet your appetite for this. I was showing you that this view is not new, it's not outlandish, and it is in fact held by a good number of scholars. So if you want to see just something of how much this proliferates in the literature, go back and watch the first episode. Now, before getting into what I want to talk about today I'm going to explain to you where the debate arises, why there are differences among the translations at this point. If matters are as straightforward as I think, why is it that so many modern translations render it differently? But last time I told you that I had this clip from Abu Musab. Right. Abu Musab, I said, is one of my favorite Muslims because Abu Musab is actually honest when it comes to, for the most part, what Islam teaches. He doesn't try and sugarcoat things. He just speaks things according to the Islamic sources. That's not to claim that he's always right, but he certainly strives to be faithful to the Islamic sources. But I mentioned not only is Abu Musab my favorite Muslim for that reason, I also mentioned that if you wanted to find somebody who is the Islamic version of Sam Shamoun, then you should look no further than Abu Musab. But I had trouble downloading that video because it kept dropping the audio, and I couldn't figure out why. So I'm going to share my screen this time. I've figured out a way around that. I'm going to share my screen this time, and I'm going to show you this clip from Abu Musab. So this is the Sam Shamoun of Islam.
What else y'all want, man? Akhi, if you don't like this channel, just go away, man. That's like me going on some cooking channel and then the guy is making pizza and I tell him, I hate pizza. Then get the heck out of here, bro. What are you doing on my channel commenting on hating pizza? I'm making pizza. My people like pizza. You don't like pizza? Go to a hamburger channel. Y'all come to my channel want to yap, yakhi, get out. I'm not trying to make money out of y'all. I'm not trying to get more subscribers. This is what it is. If you don't like it, wallah, we will put you on this bald head that I shaved just a few hours ago. Still fresh. You will slide right off. You will fall in my lap. I will give you a babroni. I'll let you drink my coffee. Of course, I will get you off my lap. Who are you to sit on my lap? It's a hypothetical.
All right. How did you guys like how did you guys like the Islamic Sam Shamoun? Well, I'm not sure what his block record is, but so actually I think for Abu Musab, doing live streams is more of a recent thing. So I don't know if he's yet had an opportunity to really block people, but I saw that and I thought, oh my goodness, this is Sam. This is the Islamic Sam Shamoun. So you all make sure to go and share that with Sam. And all right, well, okay, jokes aside, are you guys ready to get into the topic? Are you guys ready to get into the topic? All right, let me know, because you need to be ready for this, okay? Because one thing I mentioned last time is that I'm going to have to explain some things with respect to Hebrew. Now, I don't think this is too difficult for anybody to get if you haven't had any Hebrew. Of course, if you've had any Hebrew, then this will be pretty easy. But it's not going to be all that difficult, but it will require you to apply yourself. So now it's not going to be like that the whole show. Only portions of this will be focusing on some of this Hebrew stuff that I think you need to understand to get this issue. So I'm going to share my screen again. And pull up my slides. Oops. Wrong one. That's Abu Musab. Let's go here. All right. So you can see here the Hebrew text. Now, I realize all of that just looks like gobbledygook unless you've had Hebrew, but follow along with me. Okay, so this is the first two verses of Genesis 4. Here it is in the New American Standard Bible. This is my favorite translation of the Bible into English, but like all translations, it is imperfect, right? No translation is perfect. It's impossible in the first place to go from one language into another without losing something, right? It doesn't mean that you can't translate something. It doesn't mean that people can't get the gist of what was being said, but you're always going to lose something. Just to give an easy example, if you think of Psalm 119, right, it's the longest psalm, and in fact, the longest chapter in the Bible. Psalm 119 consists of 22 sections of 8 verses each, right? So you have in the first section 8 verses, the second section 8 verses, all the way through to the end, 22 sections. Well, this is known as an acrostic psalm, and that's because in each section, say the first section, the first 8 verses, each verse begins with the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Each verse begins with the letter Aleph. The next 8 verses all begin with the letter Bet, and so on and so forth through all the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Now, you can't easily translate that sort of thing into English without it losing, without it being unintelligible to people. And so translators don't even try, right? They just translate the meaning of the words. And here you understand something of the reason for that once you know what the psalm is all about. The psalm is all about the word of God, right? It's talking about, it says it's the psalm that says things like, your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. Throughout the psalm, David says how I love your law, your commandments, your precepts, all these sorts of things. The entire psalm is taken up with the word of God. And so fittingly, it begins with every word or every letter of the Hebrew alphabet. That sort of thing just doesn't come over into English or any other language in the same way that you'd find it in the Hebrew. So there's always something that is going to be lost in translation. That's why commentaries are very helpful here. That's why the Lord, in his wisdom, has appointed pastors and elders in the church, people who are to devote themselves to the word, so they can communicate these things to people, things they might not otherwise see. In fact, we even have an example here in the passage that I have on the screen, because in the English translation, you might not see the connection. I've been going through Genesis again with my son, and I keep pointing this out to him, but we often miss the connection between things just because of these translation issues. In verse 1, it says, now the man had relations with his wife Eve, and she conceived and gave birth to Cain, and she said, I have gotten a man-child with the help of the Lord. Now here, you won't see a connection between the name that she gives to Cain and the statement that she makes, I have gotten a man-child with the help of the Lord. But in Hebrew, the name Cain or Cain is the word got, right? It means to acquire or possess. And it sounds like the Hebrew word got or gotten, which is the statement that Eve makes, I have gotten a man-child with the help of the Lord. So there's a bit of a wordplay going on here, right? And that sort of thing gets lost in the English translation. The same thing is true, for example, when the Lord changes Abram's name to Abraham. Remember, when the Lord changes Abram's name to Abraham, he says, for I will make you the father of many nations. Abraham means father of many nations. But here's how this is rendered in the New American Standard. But here is how I am suggesting that this should be translated. So this is my translation of the Hebrew. Oh, looks like my slide, I shouldn't have had my translation on there twice. But here's how I've translated it. And Adam knew Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain. And she said, I have gotten a man, the Lord. And she again bore his brother Abel, and Abel was a keeper of flocks, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. So on this translation, it would mean that Eve believed that Cain, as her firstborn son, was in fact the promised one. And more than that, she believed that the promised one, the expected one, was to be God himself. So even though, without any doubt, Eve was wrong to identify Cain as the promised child, on this translation, this was at least Eve's initial conclusion. She believed that this child was the promised one, in fact, the Lord come in the flesh. Now, here's where you're going to have to put on your thinking caps. We're going to do a little bit of Hebrew for a minute. Here you have in red the Hebrew particle et. Okay, it's here you have the Hebrew alphabet. And remember that Hebrew goes from right to left. So if you go to the top right corner, you're looking at the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And if you go to the bottom left corner, you're looking at the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And that gives you the letters Aleph and Tav. That is essentially that particle that I just showed you a second ago. The particle right here in Genesis 4:1. Okay. So that's the first and last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and it's known as a particle in Hebrew. Now, this particle can be used in two different ways, basically. It can either be used as the direct object marker. Okay, now here you'll notice, and this is important to get so you'll understand the later slides. Here you have the particle et, and then in parentheses, I have it transliterated, okay? So that's how you translate that, that Hebrew particle. That's how you transliterate it, okay? So ordinarily, this particle is used to indicate the definite direct object, okay? The word that follows it is the definite direct object. In other words, when you see this particle, and it's being used to mark out the definite direct object, the particle does not mean anything. I mean, in terms of, it doesn't have a verbal meaning that should be translated into English. It simply performs a function in Hebrew that marks out the word that is the direct object of the sentence. Okay, so whatever word follows et, Aleph and Tav, whatever word follows it, when it's functioning as the direct, definite direct object marker, is the direct object of the sentence. Okay, so now I have a Hebrew sentence here. This is the first verse of the Bible. It says, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim va et haaretz. You should notice that the particle et is used twice in this verse. Okay, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim va et haaretz. Okay, and we translate that as in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Okay, so here is, I put the definite direct object marker in red so you can see it. Okay, now here's what I want you to notice. Okay, look at the transliteration. Bereshit bara Elohim et. Okay, you notice that I put et in red. Okay, I've marked it out so that you can see it. But notice that in the English sentence, there are no words in red. Okay, there are no words in red. That's because the direct object marker gets no translation. It is not a word. It is marking out the direct object of the sentence. Okay, now a few more things, and I'll illustrate this to make sure you all understand, and then I'll take a moment and ask you if you're all tracking with me. But here is, I've circled the relevant phrases here. The Hebrew expression et hashamayim. Hashamayim means, hashamayim means the heavens, okay? And haaretz means the earth, okay? So you can see in the English translation that it translates, by the way, the word ha, that's the definite article in Hebrew, right? So ha Shemayim means the heavens, and ha eretz means the earth. Okay, but again, notice that the word in red, the particle in red, is not translated because it's the direct object. It's noting the direct object. When you look at the English sentence, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The heavens and the earth are the objects receiving the action. They are what is being created. Okay. Now, there's another way. Well, actually, let me just. Here's another way of doing this. If you look at the last line here, I've indicated where the direct object marker appears in the sentence. In the bottom where it says, in the beginning, God created, then you see an arrow. The arrow represents the direct object marker. Okay, it's not a word, it's pointing to the direct objects of the sentence. Okay, so the heavens and the earth are the direct objects. Okay, now here's a way that just to illustrate this in English. Okay, in an English sentence, take the sentence, I caught the ball. Okay, the word I is the subject of the sentence, right? The word caught is the verb, it's the action, and the ball is the object, the definite direct object of the sentence. So it's what's receiving the action. If this were written in Hebrew, you would have the word et in between the phrase I caught and the phrase the ball. Okay. And then again, I have that represented by the arrow, but you do not translate that into English because we do not need it in English. In English, we know what the direct object of the sentence is primarily because of word order. However, in Hebrew, it's a different kind of language. In fact, if you go back to this sentence here, the first sentence in the Bible, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The sentence could be hypothetically in a different order. It could be, we could say the heavens and the earth were created by God, right? But in Hebrew, the problem would be, unless you have the definite direct object marker there, you wouldn't know what the definite direct object is of the sentence. You'd wonder if it was saying, in the beginning, God and the heavens created the earth, or God and the earth created the heavens, or the heavens and the earth created God. So the definite direct object marker is necessary in order to indicate what the direct object is of the sentence. We do not need that in English, like I said. So this is the importance of the word et. Okay. Now, here's another way that this particle is used. Okay, here's another Hebrew sentence. This comes from Genesis 21:20. It says, Vayahi Elohim et Hana'ar. Okay, but here, in this case, you have the English translation, and God was with the boy. Okay, so here it is. I'm putting the definite direct, or excuse me, I'm putting the particle in red again. But notice this time it is translated because this time it represents the word with. Okay. So in this translation, the phrase et hana'ar, the phrase, the word hana'ar, it's the phrase the boy, preceded by et. Et here represents the word with. Okay. Now, I don't want to get too technical with anything and get bogged down in precisely how to distinguish, in this case, why it means with as opposed to being the direct object marker. But surely you can see that in this case, it can't mean the direct object marker, because otherwise it would mean, and God was the boy, right? It would be saying that God was Isaac. All right, so here are the two main options for understanding this expression when it comes to Genesis 4:1. In fact, I should go back. I need to go back here. Let me. Actually, I'm going way ahead here, but I want to go back to Genesis 4:1 because what you may not have realized, why I'm telling you all of this, is because this expression here, where you see et, this is Genesis 4:1, right? It says, Kaniti ish et Yahweh. Okay, so kaniti means I have acquired, ish means a man, et, that's the particle, it's the word in question, and it's followed by the divine name Yahweh. So the question is it the direct object marker? Does it mean I have acquired a man, the Lord, or is it being used as the preposition with? I have acquired a man with the Lord. Now, I'll just tell you real quickly, because I'm not going to talk about this today, but I'm going to go through, let me just stop screen sharing here for a moment so I can see your comments. I'm going to go through the alternative proposals here. But one thing I'm going to tell you now, since I'm not going to look at it yet, is most translators recognize that if you translate this, I have acquired a man with the Lord, the sense is problematic. That's why the New American Standard Version, along with most others, actually add words to the text in order to make it intelligible. Because if you say, I have acquired a man with the Lord, it sounds like Eve is saying that her and God have received this child. And her and God were somehow cooperatively involved in this endeavor, whereas Scripture uniformly presents God is the one who is the exclusive source of children. And I'll come back to all of that. But if you look at the New American Standard, just look at the New American Standard, it actually has the phrase with the help of. And the preposition never means in any of its occurrences with the help of. Eve is not saying I've acquired a man with the help of. That phrase, even when used as a preposition, never means that. It's never used in that way. And so what you get in a lot of translations is attempts to smooth this out and make it workable. Okay. But I'm going to come to that later. What I want to do today is show you the merits of the case for taking this as the direct object marker. Okay, so what are the reasons for taking this as the direct object marker? Some of these I'm just going to mention. Some of these I'm going to follow up by actually giving you going into this in some detail. Okay, now after I give you these reasons, I'm going to tell you the primary reason why scholars do not follow this, right? I'm not talking about all scholars. Remember, I gave you a slew of scholars who agree with this. I'm going to tell you why those scholars who disagree with it ultimately disagree with it, what their primary reason is, okay? So here are those reasons. Let me share my screen again. Okay. In the first place, while the word et can be used as a preposition, by far and away, the ordinary meaning of et is that it functions as the direct object marker. Okay, anyone who knows Hebrew, I was going to quote sources for you, but anybody who knows Hebrew knows that this is the ordinary function of the direct of the particle et. It ordinarily functions as the direct object marker. So the question here would be, why take it in some other sense in the case of Genesis 4:1? Okay. Second, taking it as the direct object marker yields a straightforward, problem-free translation. Now here, when I say it's problem-free, I'm talking about grammatically. There is no grammatical problem that follows from taking it as the direct object marker. The statement, I have acquired a man, the Lord, is an intelligible sense, right? It means it's an intelligible sense in English as well as in Hebrew. However, taking it as the preposition, like I said, requires them to monkey with the text because it doesn't render an intelligible sense. And again, that's something that I'm going to talk about in a subsequent broadcast. Third, the taking it as the direct object marker is the same use of the term that's found in the immediate context. Okay, I don't know if, well, I think I have in a subsequent slide. I'm going to show you this in a subsequent slide. The immediate context uses this phrase 4 other times, and in every occurrence, it's understood by everyone as the direct object marker. So the question is, once again, why do people suddenly take this occurrence as something other than the direct object marker? It's ordinary meaning, it's straightforward meaning, it's meaning that doesn't yield any problematic sense. Why do they take it in a different way when that's the very way it's being used in all other cases in the immediate context? Okay. Fourth, it's the same usage found throughout the first 5 chapters of Genesis. I'm going to show you a slide on this and show you just how common or frequently this word is used. And you're going to get a sense of a problem when somebody suddenly wants to say this word is being used as the preposition with. Okay. Fifth, this translation is recognized by, well, both modern and ancient translations in both Aramaic and Greek. Now, you might wonder why I've included this as an argument in favor of this. In light of the fact that many modern translations and ancient translations don't translate it this way. Okay. Well, because what I'm going to argue is that there's a strong theological prejudice against this interpretation. That's the primary reason. It has nothing to do with grammar. It has to do with theological prejudice that people don't take it this way. And so the very fact that anyone has understood it in this sense, especially ancient sources, ancient translations by Jews into Greek, ancient translations by Jews into Aramaic, that speaks volumes for how strong this is in the original. Okay, if this didn't have a strong basis for being understood this way, then I can assure you, given the strong prejudice against this, which is evident, right, in many translations, ancient and modern, they would have never done this. Okay. Sixth, the alternative interpretations, as I said, are all problematic, and I'll go through those. The Septuagint renders this dia tou theou, which means through the Lord or through God. Onkelos renders this from before the Lord. I have acquired a man from before the Lord. None of these are the sense of the Hebrew here. None of the other translations I didn't mention, but I'll come to those in a subsequent broadcast. Seventh, this is perfectly consistent with the trajectory initiated in the messianic promise in Genesis 3:15, that Eve would be expecting the promised one. And eighth, it is perfectly consistent with the expectation of the antediluvians. It's perfectly consistent with what the antediluvians were expecting. Okay. Now, okay, I'm going to skip past these slides. Okay. Oh, actually, I'm going to show you this one. Okay. Here is the Hebrew verse again. You'll notice that the particle, or these 2 verses, you'll notice that the Hebrew particle et is used 5 times. Okay. It says, and Adam knew, v'ha'adam yada et Chava, right? It's saying Adam knew. Then you have the direct object marker, the first particle in red. Chava is the name for Eve. So notice Adam knew Chava, Eve. So it's the direct object marker. Okay. Eve is the one Adam knew. It doesn't mean an Adam knew with Eve, right? His wife. That just doesn't render an intelligible sense. The same thing is true for every other occurrence throughout the Hebrew sentence. Here it is. I'm just going to give it to you in English. Remember that arrows represent the definite direct object marker. They receive no translation in English. So here's the sentence. But notice that in these occurrences, et is taken as the definite direct object marker in every occurrence except for this place where it says with the help of the Lord in modern translations. Okay, what I'm pointing out to you is there's an inconsistency here. translators, even though this is sandwiched in between two other uses of the definite direct object marker, right, on both hands, right, two before it, two after it, where it's the definite direct object marker, they nevertheless take the one in the middle as if it were a preposition, right? It says, now the man knew Eve. Okay, there's no translation of the of et, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain. Cain is the direct object, and she said, I have acquired I have gotten a man child with the help of the Lord. Again, she bore, direct object, his brother, direct object, Abel, and Abel was a keeper of flocks. Okay, so here's my point. The particle et is used 5 times in these 2 verses. In every other case, all translations render it as the definite direct object, except for when it precedes the phrase Yahweh. Okay, why do they do that? Okay, they ought to be consistent here, unless they have good reason to go in a different direction. Okay, now let me show you. Well, I'll just show it to you this way. In Genesis 4:1 through 2, you have the phrase et hava. That's just translated as Eve, right? Et is taken as the direct object marker. Next, you have et Cain, which is just translated as Cain. Et is taken as the direct object marker. Not so when it comes to et Yahweh, right? Here it's taken as the preposition with. Okay. Then you have et Achiv. Achiv means his brother, but et is taken as the direct object marker. Et Havel, meaning Abel, is taken again as Abel preceded by the direct object marker. Okay, but now look at this. Actually, this is basically duplicated on this slide. Here you have every single occurrence of the definite direct object marker from Genesis 1:1 all the way down to the relevant use of the particle in 4:1c. Okay, in 4:1c, that's where you have, I have acquired a man, et Yahweh. I have acquired a man, the Lord. Notice that every single occurrence of et prior to 4:1 is taken as the definite direct object marker. Okay, et is used twice in verse 1. Chapter 1, verse 1. It's used in 1:4, 1:7, 4 times in 1:16, and so on. In fact, its use in 4:1, where it says, et Yahweh, I have acquired a man, et Yahweh, it's the 50th occurrence of the definite direct object marker. Okay, why suddenly do translators depart from this consistent usage of the definite direct object marker? Okay, I already pointed out that this is how it's used in the immediate context, but now my point is this is how it's been used in all prior occurrences throughout the text of Genesis before you get to verse 1 of chapter 4. Okay, so why in the world take it differently? Okay, well, here I'm going to take a pause. Okay, does everybody at least have some sense of what I'm saying here? Okay, I realize that this is probably new, and it's easy if you've spent time on something to just expect everybody to get it. But I just want to make sure. Autocorrect, it's a pain sometimes. Okay, so does everybody have at least a sense of what I'm talking about? Okay. All right, so Slam says yes. Talitha says yes. Right, the translations seem against the grammar, too many Marys says. Okay, so you at least have a sense of what I'm talking about. Okay, it ordinarily functions as the definite direct object marker. You should have a good reason for going against that understanding if you want to take it differently. Okay, I maintain, I'm not going to do that today, I maintain all other attempts to translate it differently are abysmal failures. Okay, I'll show you why next time. But for now, if that's the ordinary meaning, you should have a good reason for taking it otherwise. Okay, especially when this sense yields a perfectly natural grammatical understanding. Okay, especially when this is the contextual usage. This is the consistent usage throughout Genesis up to this point. In fact, even for a good bit after this, throughout Genesis. And then there were all those other reasons that I mentioned. So why, you might ask, do scholars suddenly take this as a preposition? Okay, why do they suddenly think it means with, or from, or through, or with the help of? Okay, why do they suddenly take it differently? Well, get ready to find out that it has nothing to do with the grammar of the text. It has everything to do with theological prejudice. Okay. Now, before I show you the proof of this, let me at first make a distinction here. Okay. You first of all have liberal scholars on the one hand, right? Now, it's not surprising if liberal scholars have a theological prejudice, right? Liberal scholars do not believe the Bible, right? They do not believe that Jesus is God come in the flesh. They certainly don't believe in divine prophecy. They don't believe any of this sort of thing. And so the idea that Eve thought she would conceive and give birth to a divine person, to a liberal, is just something that's impossible to allow for, right? Because this would give credence to Christianity. Such an anticipation before Jesus comes, and they don't do this only with something like Genesis 4. They do this with every Old Testament prophecy. Isaiah 7:14 can't be talking about a virgin conceiving a child who would truly and properly be Emmanuel. Isaiah 9:6, which prophesies a child who would be mighty God. Oh, that must just be an exalted term used for King Hezekiah, right? On and on down the list, liberal scholars push against the notion of a truly divine Messiah. They cannot allow for it in light of their presuppositions, okay? But it's not just liberal scholars who have presuppositions. Christian scholars have presuppositions too. You have Christian scholars who are more or less conservative, Christian scholars who are even conservative, but perhaps have a different view of what could have been known at certain points in history. Okay. I certainly grant the notion of what's called progressive revelation. However, I think there are flaws in how a lot of people use that idea. And I'll hold off on explaining that more, but I want you to see what I'm talking about. You're going to see that according to those scholars who oppose this, for the most part, and certainly as the primary reason, these scholars give not grammatical reasons, but theological reasons. They do not believe that Eve could have possibly expected a divine Messiah already. Okay. Even conservative scholars think this idea is too soon for Eve to have had this expectation. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen again. And here is the first. This is Gabeline, and Gabeline does not reject this interpretation, but he at least he points to the fact that was motivating ancient translators. Okay, Gabeline says the evidence from the versions, the Septuagint, dia tou theou, which means through God, the Vulgate, per deum, which means to God or for God, suggests that the accusative sense of I have brought forth a man, the Lord, was not acceptable to the early translators. And they avoided that sense by means of a free translation. The modern translation, with the help of the Lord, is not attested elsewhere in Scripture. Okay, so notice what Gabeline is saying here. He's recognizing that because the ancient translations don't even agree with each other, they're struggling with the way this is rendered in the Hebrew, and they're trying to they're trying to give an alternative rendering that doesn't run against their if it just had a straightforward meaning, they wouldn't be all over the map. But the fact is, they're all over the map, right? All of them seem to be fishing for some other word to put in here instead of the word that should have been used in those languages. languages. Okay, so Gabeline recognizes that there was some motivation here to avoid the straightforward sense of the Hebrew. But Gabeline actually accepts this the accusative sense, or the using it as the direct object marker in the sense that I'm holding. Okay, but here are scholars that are admitting this as part of their own motivation for rejecting what I have offered as what I'm claiming is the true translation. Here is Michael Heiser. Okay, now I don't know why everybody picks on Luther as if Luther was the first person to come up with this. He certainly wasn't. But here, Michael Heiser says Luther was seeing in this issue, this grammatical issue in reference to Genesis 3:15, the promised seed. Because Luther's already thinking that the promised seed is God as man. And so Luther is actually reading a lot into Genesis 3:15. Again, I'm not saying that it can't go that direction. He's talking about the grammar. Okay, this was I'm quoting only part of his comment here. This comes from his Naked Bible podcast number 211. But in the prior comments, he says that this is grammatically sound, right? To take it the way Luther did, as I have acquired a man, the Lord. Okay. But he says Luther's actually reading a lot into Genesis 3:15. Again, I'm not saying that it can't go that direction, but it's kind of difficult to look at Genesis 4:1 and think to yourself that the writer is trying to cryptically telegraph the promised seed of Genesis 3:15. That's pretty much a leap to get that from the awkward grammar here, but that's what Luther did. Now, by the way, let me just point out to you, he's tipped his hand here by referring to it as awkward grammar, okay? It is not awkward grammar if you take it as the definite direct object marker. It is straightforward grammar, okay? There is nothing awkward about it. It is a straightforward usage of the direct object marker. The only reason that it can be called awkward is if you reject the definite direct object marker and take it as a preposition. That is the only time it becomes awkward. That's why you get translators suddenly saying through the Lord, from the Lord, with the Lord, by the Lord, to the Lord. It's because the Hebrew does not support any of those translations, but they're desperately trying to find something that they can make work that doesn't smack against what they think is theologically possible. Okay, so that's Michael Heiser. Here's Kyle and Dillich. Listen to what Kyle and Dillich say. So far as the grammar is concerned, the expression et Yahweh might be rendered as in apposition to Ish, a man, the Lord. Okay, so again, they're saying the grammar supports taking it the way Luther took it, as Eve saying she has acquired a man, the Lord. Okay, again, that's the interpretation I'm arguing for. Kyle and Dillich are saying the grammar is consistent with that. He says, but the sense would not allow it. Okay, what does he mean by the sense would not allow it? Well, go on. For even if we could suppose the faith of Eve in the promised conqueror of the serpent to have been sufficiently alive for this, the promise of God had not given her the slightest reason to expect that the promised seed would be of divine nature and might be Jehovah, so as to lead her to believe that she had given birth to Jehovah now. So again, notice he admits that this is grammatically sound to take it as Eve saying, I have acquired a man, the Lord, but because he does not think Eve could have believed that her child or the coming Messiah would be the Lord, he says we can't allow for this understanding. We can't accept this as the true meaning, okay? So you've heard Michael Heiser, now you've heard Kyle and Dillich. Here's John Jefferson Davis. He says, et, that's how he's transliterating the particle, et can be understood as the sign of the direct object, okay? According to the former interpretation, where et is taken as the direct object, Eve was referring to the deliverer promised in 3:15. According to the latter interpretation, where et is taken as the preposition with, Eve was emphasizing God's role in the birth of her child. We can safely conclude, whichever interpretation we adopt, that Eve saw her son as some kind of deliverer. She may have identified him with the deliverer of 3:15, but she could scarcely have understood that deliverer to be the divine Messiah. So once again, the straightforward grammatical meaning of the verse is rejected because this writer does not believe. Now, by the way, I respect these writers. I've learned a great deal from them. I'm not just, completely bashing them, but I'm pointing out here that they're imposing their presuppositions on the text. They are not at this point being true to the text. They're imposing their own presuppositions on the text. Okay, so here is another example of that. Here is Adam Clarke. By the way, I forgot to remind you, if you don't see a reference to what I'm quoting from, all you have to know when there's no reference is that I'm citing from the commentary of the named author. Okay, so all you would have to do is turn to their commentary on Genesis 4:1, and this is where you'll find their comments. If it's not a commentary that I'm quoting from, then I usually put some kind of bibliographical reference. Okay, so in this case, I'm quoting from Adam Clarke's commentary. He says, "I have gotten a man from the Lord." Cain signifies acquisition. Hence, Eve says, "Kaniti," I have gotten or acquired a man, et Yehovah, the Lord. Notice how he translates et Yehovah, the Lord. He does not translate it as the preposition followed by the Lord, by Jehovah. He translates it as the direct object marker. But notice how he goes on. It is extremely difficult to ascertain the sense in which Eve used these words, which have been as variously translated as understood. He's talking about those translators that reject it as the direct object marker. Suddenly it becomes difficult, and translators are falling all over each other, bouncing into each other like a bunch of Keystone Cops, trying to come up with an alternative rendering. He goes on, most expositors think that Eve imagined Cain to be the promised seed that should bruise the head of the serpent. This exposition really seems too refined for that period. In other words, it's too specific for Eve to have had that kind of belief. Okay, it is very likely that she meant no more than to acknowledge that it was through God's peculiar blessing that she was enabled to conceive and bring forth a son. Okay, and it goes on. Here is John Peter Lang. The interpretation of Luther and others, including Philippi, namely the man, the Lord, not only anticipates. Now, this is an objection, by the way. I just couldn't fit in it was a long section. He's offering this as an objection to the interpretation of Luther and Philippi. The interpretation of Luther and others, including Philippi, namely the man, the Lord, not only anticipates the unfolding of the messianic idea, but goes beyond it, for the Messiah is not Jehovah absolutely. So he's saying this interpretation can't be accepted because it goes beyond the messianic idea. And Eve certainly couldn't have had knowledge that goes beyond the bare idea that God will send somebody in the future in some kind of vague and nebulous role as a deliverer. Okay. Now, by the way, I should point out when Lang says, "For he is not the Messiah," or "he's not Jehovah absolutely," this is not a liberal theologian. He's not saying that Jesus is not God. He's not saying the Messiah is not God. What he's making a more technical point. He's saying that the Messiah is a divine person, but he's not the entire Godhead in the sense of he's not the Father and the Spirit. And so in his mind, it would be inconsistent to just simply use the name Jehovah to represent him as though he were God in the absolute sense, meaning to the exclusion of other persons. But that's just flawed. I mean, the prophets do that, don't they? In Jeremiah 23:6, the name Jehovah is used absolutely for the Messiah, absolutely in the sense that he is the embodiment of Jehovah, but not absolutely in the sense that it excludes the Father and the Spirit being Jehovah. But in any case, his argument here is that Eve could not have thought that the Messiah would be God. Way too early for that sort of thing. Now here's Leopold. He's actually a very good commentator. Again, I remind you, I'm not putting these people down as otherwise helpful. But here's Leopold. Listen to what Leopold says. Nothing had as yet indicated to Eve the divine character of the seed of the woman. To claim that she could quite naturally have anticipated that fact would practically make revelation unnecessary. Man could adequately surmise the most vital of truths. Here is the Cambridge Bible for schools and colleges. This one's easy to access. It's found online. It says, according to the traditional patristic and medieval interpretation, okay, notice this, the traditional patristic and medieval interpretation. Let me ask you a question here, folks. Was Luther before or after the patristic and medieval period? Okay. Obviously, Luther came after them. Okay, I point this out because so many scholars like to pretend that Luther originated this notion. Okay, when I quoted for you scholars who taught this, I only went back to Luther because I thought that was sufficient. But notice this resource is admitting this interpretation goes back to the patristic and medieval period, not just to the contemporary period or the Reformation period. According to the traditional patristic and medieval interpretation, the sentence admitted of a literal rendering in a messianic sense. I have gotten a man, even Jehovah. That is, in the birth of a child, I have gotten one in whom I foresee the incarnation of the Lord. But here's the objection. Apart from the inadmissibility of this New Testament thought, it is surely impossible that the messianic hope should thus be associated with the name of Cain. But notice how it goes on to make this point. The Targum of Palestine, however, has, I have acquired a man, the angel of the Lord. So it's saying, oh, it's impossible that this notion could have been anticipated by Eve. But then it quotes a Targum saying this very thing, right? That she was, in fact, anticipating the birth of a divine person. Now, that should be significant because it shows that Jews were expecting a divine Messiah, okay? And you'll often hear a lot of scholars saying Jews weren't expecting a divine Messiah, but they were. So what do you think the chances are that scholars could be wrong, that Eve could have had this expectation, even as far back as before the flood? Well, okay, just a couple more quotations here, maybe only one more, just to show you this, and I think I'll have beaten this to death. But here's the pulpit commentary. It says, while it might not be difficult to account for the mistake of a joyful mother in assuming or in supposing that the fruit of her womb was the promised seed, though if she did believe so, it is a caution to interpreters of prophecy, it is not so easy to explain her belief that the promised seed was to be Jehovah, since no such announcement was made in the proto-evangel. Okay? All right. Now I'm going to, oops, you just got to see all my emails. Okay. Now I'm going to pause there. Okay, how much time do we have? Oh gosh, I only have half an hour to deal with this objection. Okay. Now I'm just going to kind of talk to you straight. Actually, I do have some more slides I want to show you. Does everybody see the reason that the commentators are giving for not following the straightforward, uniform usage throughout Genesis 1 through 4 of taking the particle as the definite direct object marker? Okay. Does everybody see what's going on here? All right. Let me know that you're following, folks. Even the people who are against this interpretation, number one, admit that this is sound. It is perfectly consistent with the Hebrew grammar. It yields an intelligible sense, but they reject it as their primary reason because they do not believe it is possible for Eve to have known this. Now, let me ask you a question, folks. How do we know what Eve believed? How do we know what Eve believed? Okay, the only way we could know what Eve believed is if we have some revelation telling us what Eve believed. Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, they can't in the sense of if we're not told anything, then there's no way to know, right? But my point here is the only way we can know if Eve could have had such an expectation at this time is if we're told so. Well, it's begging the question in my mind when they fly in the face of the straightforward prima facie reading of this text and say it can't mean what it says because Eve couldn't have known this. How do they know she couldn't have known this, right? If the text itself yields this understanding, why pretend that you know she couldn't have known this? Okay. Now, there's another issue here, and that is a failure to recognize that while we don't necessarily know certain things just by reading Genesis 1 through 4, it's a mistake to assume that Eve had no more to go on than what we're told in Genesis 1 through 4, right? Do we seriously think that the first 4 chapters of Genesis encompass the entire experience or range of knowledge that Eve had? I mean, do you really think that? In fact, Genesis 1, Adam and Eve aren't on the scene until they're not mentioned until 26 when God says, let us make man. But then it's not until chapter 2 that it narrows in on Adam and Eve, and it gives us the account of Adam in the garden before Eve's even there. Before she's even there, Adam names the animals. Then God creates Eve. Then you have suddenly after that in chapter 3, the fall. And then we're in chapter 4, okay? Adam and Eve lived, hundreds of years, and we're only given really 3 chapters, 3 1/4 chapters, right? Chapter 2, 3, 4, and part of chapter 5 that tell us about the life of Adam and Eve, okay? How, pray tell, can somebody pretend to know everything that Eve knew? How do they know that Eve did not understand the promised coming Savior to be the Lord? Okay. How do they know that? Okay. What I'm suggesting to you is they're assuming that Eve couldn't have known more based on the limited information we have. Okay. But that's just fallacious. And especially when the text itself in chapter 4, as I'm arguing, actually points very clearly in the opposite direction. It points to the fact that Eve expected this to be the promised seed. Now, let me just point out a few things that actually show this, okay? Number 1, did you notice how Eve speaks when she says, in Genesis 4:1, she says, I have acquired a man, the Lord. That word acquired is the first tip-off that something unusual is going on here, okay? That is not the word that's ordinarily used, acquired, is not the word that's ordinarily used when a mother has a child. In fact, it's not only not the word ordinarily used, it's never used when a woman has a child, okay? They don't say I have acquired. The word means to acquire, possess, that's the basic meaning of the word. In some contexts, it can mean create, right? But ordinarily, it means to possess or acquire. But that's not the word that's ordinarily used. You usually have the word, yalad or what have you, where it talks about, they might talk about, my point here is just basically that I don't want to get too confusing with everyone. This is not the word that's normally used when a woman has a child. Why does Eve speak in this unusual way? I have acquired a man. Okay, that's the first thing. Secondly, why does she say I have acquired a man? Okay, never in the entirety of the Old Testament does a woman ever say when she has a child, I have acquired a man. It's the word for man, ish. I have acquired a man. Okay. Now, translations, again, drop the ball here. I read the NASB earlier. The NASB says, I have acquired a man-child. But it doesn't say man-child. It says ish. It says man. The word that never means an infant, a toddler, what have you. It always refers to a man. Why does Eve say, I have acquired a man? Okay. What I'm suggesting to you is that Eve is already seeing in this child the fulfillment of the promise made in Genesis 3:15. In fact, if you go back to Genesis 3:15, I'm just going to lightly suggest this. I'm actually going to do, I told you guys before that I'm going to do a whole series on messianic prophecy, and I'm going to deal with Genesis 3:15. There's a lot there that has to be dealt with. But if you go back to Genesis 3:15, the translation, when it says, the Lord speaking to the serpent says, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and hers, and he will crush your head, and you will bruise his heel. Okay. But then the Lord turns to the woman, and he says, in pain, you shall give birth to children. Now remember, or you shall have, seed and so forth. Remember, he's just made the promise of the coming seed. Then he tells her woman's going to have labor when giving birth to children. And he says, yet your desire shall be for ishka. Okay. A lot of translations say for your husband, but it's the word ish with the pronominal suffix your ish. Okay. Ish, the word for man. Your desire shall be for your man, and he will rule over you. Okay. What I am lightly suggesting here is the possibility that what this prophecy is saying is not, Eve, you're going to have children. It's going to be very painful, but you're going to desire your husband, but he's going to rule over you. In other words, you're going to desire to reign over him, but he's going to lord it over you. Okay, that's the way most people understand this. What I'm suggesting to you is that this is a messianic prophecy. It's part of the messianic prophecy. God tells her she's going to have a seed. Then he tells her she's going to give birth to her seed in pain. Then he says, but nevertheless, your desire shall be for your man. That man, the man just promised, right? Your desire shall be for him, and he will reign over you. Okay. Now, even if you don't accept that interpretation, okay, even if you don't accept that interpretation, let me ask you a question. If God just promised Adam and Eve that they're going to have a seed who's going to restore them to communion with God, what they lost by sinning, they're ejected from the garden, the favorable presence of God, they become subject to his wrath and curse, right? Subject to death and pain and sickness and toil and, working by the sweat of their brow, giving birth through great pain. If this is the consequence of the fall, and God has said this is going to be reversed, you're going to be restored to your primeval condition by this child, what do you think Eve was expecting when she had a child? What do you think she was hoping for? In fact, what do you think every woman in Israel was hoping? If you were a woman and you were an Israelite and you were a pious Israelite and you knew that God was going to send a redeemer, he was going to be born of a woman, what do you think you would have been harboring in your heart? Storing up in your heart as your hope and your expectation. Naturally, any woman would be hoping, I hope I'm that woman. I hope I'm that woman to bear the Messiah. Why wouldn't Eve be thinking the same thing? Why wouldn't Eve be thinking, I hope I'm that woman, okay, who's going to be, in fact, why would she think it's going to be any other woman? God just promised it to her, right? And so naturally she would think that it could be her, okay? But now let me show you something else. You remember those commentators who all said it's impossible for Eve already to have expected a divine Messiah? What if I told you that in this very genealogy in Genesis 4, actually Genesis 4 into 5, right? In Genesis 4, you have Cain and Abel, and then it mentions Seth, and then in 5, you get Seth's genealogy. What if I tell you that during this time period, the period of the antediluvians, while Adam and Eve are still alive, there was a prophet on the scene who is not only predicting something like the first coming of Jesus, but even his second coming. Would you be surprised to know that there was even the expectation at that time of the Lord's second coming? Now, you all know the answer to this, I'm pretty sure, but you may not have thought about it in connection with this issue. That's right. Air Church got it. Enoch. Do you remember what Jude tells us? In Jude, I'm going to move ahead here to in Jude, where did I put this here? I thought I had it already pulled up. In any case, let me pull it up on a different browser here. In Jude 1, and of course there's only one chapter. In Jude 1, notice what it says about Enoch. It says, it was also about these men that Enoch, in the 7th generation from Adam, prophesied. We have a prophet here, folks. Back in the Old Testament, back in the lineage of Adam and Eve, back prior to the flood, back during the same time period, overlapping with the other patriarchs. Remember, they lived hundreds of years. He prophesied, saying, "Behold, the Lord comes with many thousands of his holy ones to execute judgment upon all, and to convict all the ungodly of all their ungodly deeds which they have done in an ungodly way, and of all the harsh things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him." So here you have an example of a prophet prophesying the second coming of Jesus of all things. So the idea that Eve could not have expected a divine Messiah is completely bunk. It is rejected. But now some of you might be asking, well, how do we know from Genesis that Enoch was a prophet? After all, there's something, I'm not going to get into the whole book of Enoch thing right now. But there is this whole question: where does this prophecy come from? Why does Jude cite it? It's certainly not found in our Old Testament. But let me just show you from Genesis itself, Genesis chapter 5, that Enoch was a prophet. Okay. Now here I'm going to share my screen again. I want you to see this. So let me share my screen. And here we go. This is Genesis chapter 5. Now follow along with me here, folks. In Enoch 5, verse 21, it says, Enoch lived 65 years and became the father of Methuselah. Okay. So Enoch had a child who was named Methuselah. Okay. Then Enoch walked with God 300 years after he became the father of Methuselah, and he had other sons and daughters. And then it talks about Enoch being taken away. All right. Now, what does the name Methuselah mean? This is just a quick smattering of scholars who point out what his name means in Hebrew. Okay. His name means at his death, it will be sent, or it will be released. And they interpret that to mean his death will release the floodwaters. Okay. That's from Samuel Bochart. Then you have Edward Stillingfleet, who says the idea that at his death, the world should be destroyed, as the meaning of his name, he says, agrees with the name Methuselah. Here you have Simon Patrick in his commentary. He says, Enoch being a prophet, as we learn from St. Jude, and foreseeing the destruction that was coming upon the earth by a deluge, immediately after the death of this son of his, gave him this name of Methuselah, which imports as much. For the first part of it, Methu, evidently carries in it the name of death, being as much as he dies. Okay, so he says Methu means he dies, and Salah signifies the sending forth of water in Job 5:10. And therefore Methuselah is as much as when he is dead shall ensue an emission or inundation of waters to the destruction of the whole earth, which ingenious conjecture of Bochartus in his Phalag is far more probable, is far more probable than any other account of his name. Okay, here's another scholar, Alfred Jones, in his Dictionary of Old Testament Proper Names. I'm not going to quote it. It says the same thing. But here's the basic breakdown. Okay, the noun mut, where you get the first part of his name, means death. And then the verb shalach, which means to send or let go. And as Cornwall and Smith in the Exhaustive Dictionary of Bible Names says, when he is dead, it shall be sent. Okay, that's the meaning of his name. It refers to the deluge. Okay, now here's where it gets interesting, folks. Remember, Enoch named his son Methuselah his name, okay, which means when he is dead, it shall be sent, or at his death, it shall come. Okay, Methuselah, we're told, died at 969 years old. Okay. In Genesis 5, it says Methuselah lived 187 years and became the father of Lamech. Then Methuselah lived 782 years after he became the father of Lamech, and he had other sons and daughters. So all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. Lamech, so you saw that, 969 years, right? There it is, 969 years. Lamech lived 182 years, and he became the father of a son. Now he called his name Noah, saying, "This one will give us rest from our work and from the toil of our hands, arising from the ground which the Lord has cursed." Then Lamech lived 595 years after he became the father of Noah, and he had other sons and daughters. So all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. Now, pay special attention here, folks. Methuselah had Lamech when he was 187 years, right? Then we're told that Lamech lived 182 years before he became the father of a son whom he named Noah, okay? Now, the question is, how long after Noah was born until the flood came? How many years was it after the birth of Noah that the flood came? Because all you have to do then is add up the number of years that Methuselah had lived before giving birth to Lamech, and then the number of years that Lamech lived before giving birth to Noah, and then the number of years that Noah had lived before the flood came, and you'll know how long after Methuselah's birth there was until the flood. Well, here it is. This is in Genesis 8 or 7. I forgot to put it there. It says Noah was 600 years old when the flood of water came upon the earth. Okay, look at verse 11. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 7th day of the month, on the same day, all the fountains of the great deep burst open. Okay, so Noah was 600 years old when the flood came. Now let's do the math. Okay, Methuselah had Lamech when he was 187. Okay, Lamech had Noah when he was 182. The flood came when Noah was 600. How much does that add up to? 969 years. How old was Methuselah when he died? 969 years. Methuselah's name means when he dies, it shall be released, or it shall come. And he was named that by his father Enoch, who was a prophet. Okay. Now this was actually recognized, by the way, by ancient Jews. It's found in a slew of ancient sources, but I just want to show you one really quickly. Going back to Genesis 7, notice what verse 10 says. It says, it came about after the 7 days that the water of the flood came upon the earth. Okay. So this is the 600th year, but it suddenly mentions after 7 days. Okay. What does this refer to? Well, here's how the Jewish Targumim understood this. This comes from Targum Neophiti on the book of Genesis. In Targum Neophiti, Genesis 7:10 says, "And at the end of the 7 days of the mourning of Methuselah, the waters of the flood came upon the earth." So the Jews recognized that Methuselah died the year that the flood came, and in fact, they reasoned correctly that he had to have died not only the year of the flood, but before it happened, because we're told that Noah was the only one who was found righteous, right, when the flood came. That's why Noah was spared. Noah was taken into the ark together with his family, right? If Methuselah was still alive, then the flood waters wouldn't have come. Methuselah and his family would have been saved. Methuselah was in the line of the righteous. He was one of those righteous descendants of Seth who called upon the name of the Lord, Genesis 4:26. So here's my point. All these scholars have assumed that Eve could not have known that her child, that the Messiah that was promised to the woman was going to be a divine Messiah. Too early for that sort of thing. And yet we find that there was a prophet in their midst. We find that he was predicting the second coming of the Lord. We find that he's predicting the coming of the flood 1,000 years later, basically 969 years after the birth of his son. Over and over again, I could point out more evidence, by the way, that you have this sort of thing happening during the lifetime of Adam and Eve. Okay. So I ask now, pray tell, why reject the straightforward meaning of the grammar? Okay. When this is what the word the particle ordinarily means. When this is what the word means in the surrounding context, the immediate context where it's used 4 other times. Et Havel, et Chayin. It always is used as the definite direct object marker. Why take et Yahweh as anything other than the definite direct object marker? Why take it any other way when this is the way it's been used from the beginning of Genesis all the way up until 4:1, where it's the 50th occurrence? Why suddenly say it means something else? Okay, why take it that way? And why not take it that way? Why go in the opposite direction when the best reason, the primary reason that people have for pushing against this is a flawed line of reasoning? A flawed line of reasoning that says Eve couldn't have known this, as if they know what Eve could have known independently of some revelation to that effect. And why say that she couldn't have known this when we have clear evidence that the patriarchs knew a lot more than we might have thought originally? Right? We know that Enoch was prophesying in those days. We know that he was prophesying the second coming of the Lord. Okay, so for all of these reasons, I cry foul. Okay, I say that modern translators and those who follow them are not being honest with the text. They're imposing theological prejudice upon the text. Okay, and so at the very least, this is not a novel interpretation. It's not a odd translation. It's not a facile translation. Indeed, it is the prima facie reading, and it is, I think, the one that has the best evidence for it. Now, what's going to really solidify this for you, I hope, is what I'll talk about next time when I show you what happens when you reject this interpretation. As soon as you reject this interpretation, suddenly you have you open a can of worms, okay? And I'm going to show you all the problems in the next broadcast. Now, ordinarily I quit at 12 o'clock, but I haven't really taken any time to answer your questions. And I also forgot to mention a few things. I'm really bad about thanking people. I hope everybody understands how thankful I am if you're a Patreon supporter. I hope this is a blessing to everyone, not just those who are supporting through Patreon. All those of you who don't support through Patreon, I hope you are thankful to them as well, because that helps me to do this. So I do want to extend my thanks to those of you who help, and encourage others who don't to also thank the Lord for them, because they help. It's just like other things that we do. We can't all contribute in 100 different directions. I realize that. But it's because somebody's contributing somewhere that we're all able to do the things that benefit a wider group of people. It's I can't give to every charity, but I'm thankful for the people that give to every other charities. So I'm not saying that everybody has to contribute to me to benefit from this by any stretch. I was doing this sort of thing for free for decades, and I'd still do it for free, but for people to support through Patreon is very helpful. In fact, I want to say to you that this particular episode was brought to you by Hutchie, or this coffee was, at least, because Hutchie bought me a coffee. So thank you, Hutchie. Thank you kindly. But I will take a moment to answer some questions if you guys have any. I realize maybe that was a whirlwind. I just kind of rushed through a bunch of stuff. Maybe it wasn't very dynamic. I'm sorry for that if it was boring at all. I could always sprinkle in a few Abu Musab clips. He's always loads of fun. Anybody have any questions? Get your questions in. Oh, somebody said, Okay, so Renatus Christo asked if I could recommend a good commentary on Genesis and Exodus from the top of your head. So the difficulty with this is not all commentaries are the same. They're not all equal in the same way. It's hard to do everything in one commentary, right? Some commentaries will focus on being homiletical, right? They're focused on aiding pastors in reading the text for the purpose of preaching it, right? So they're going through the text with that kind of goal in view, right? Which is a laudable goal. I mean, it's a good reason for a commentary. So there's commentaries of that sort. There are commentaries that aim to simply exegete the text, bring out the sense of it. There are commentaries that seek to show the redemptive historical connections, how these things fit into the flow of redemption, how certain things anticipate later ideas. So, I mean, when you have all these different possible ways of approaching a commentary, you know, one commentary is never going to suit all those things. You know, you might have some that do more than one and they do it better than others, but for the most part, they tend to be limited. Otherwise, you know, you're talking about multi-volumes on, you know, one book of the Bible. So, I mean, another thing you could be focused on is, I mean, I have entire books on just the first 3 chapters of Genesis. I have books on just the first 11 chapters of Genesis, because when it comes to those chapters, sometimes you'll get a commentary that's focusing on scientific issues, right? It's talking about what is the meaning of Genesis 1, how do we understand the creation days, if you take it literally, how does it square with science, contemporary science? If you don't take it literally, what's the justification for that? So you've got those kinds of commentaries. So one thing I would say, I mean, I really just recommend people getting a lot of commentaries, I'll be honest, because I don't think any one commentator adequately deals with any one issue. And that's just the nature of the beast. You can't, you know, and you're always going to get a commentator who drops the ball on a verse, right? But I would say that a standard commentary would be one like Bruce Waltke. Bruce Waltke has a standard commentary on Genesis. I mentioned H.C. Leupold. I don't know if that's sold separately. I have it in a set. You have it if you're looking at it from the perspective of like a question of young Earth, you know, for the first several chapters of Genesis, somebody like Leon Morris's The Genesis Record. If you're looking at it from, you know, trying to see how those who argue for an old Earth perspective would do it, you know, there are other commentaries on that. I'm trying to think of one. I mean, you got a lot. I think John Walton would do that. Actually, let me back up. 2 of the standard commentaries that are really good on Genesis are Gordon Wenham and Victor Hamilton. Okay, those are 2 contemporary standards when it comes to Genesis. And let me just look up something real quick, because just want to make sure I'm not forgetting one that I would recommend before others. So yeah, Gordon Wenham on Genesis. Keith Matthews is good on Genesis. Victor Hamilton is good on Genesis. And then you have Alan P. Ross on Creation and Blessing, which is a guide to the study and exposition of Genesis. So those are commentaries that I would recommend. But like I said, not all commentaries are going to give you everything you'd like. You know, especially now, I would encourage everybody to get a 1 or 2 volume commentary, not because it's the end of your reading commentaries or studies, but because I just encourage people to read through the Bible and at least get a basic sense of things, reading through commentaries. I mean, if you read a commentary on every book of the Bible, you're talking about 66 books, right? How long is it going to take you to do that? So I just kind of recommend, first of all, people should be reading their Bibles. They should read it over and over and over again. There's no reason people can't read the Bible in a year. There's really no reason people can't read the Bible in twice in a year. All the time people spend on their phones, 2 hours on the phones, 3 hours before the TV, all the different times people spend wasted. You could be reading your Bible. It really doesn't take that long. Many of you know that, well, I won't go into that story, but you really can read the Bible in a much quicker period of time than you think. So people should read the Bible. Then I recommend that they get a couple of volumes on the Bible as a whole. My mom texted me here. And then after that, I'm not saying this, by the way, specifically to Renatus, because I don't, of course, know what you've already read, Renatus. I'm just giving this as a general rule for people. I'd recommend reading the Bible, reading it often, picking up a couple volumes on the entire Bible, so they're going to be brief in their treatment of various passages, and then moving on from there to other commentaries. Okay, that would be my recommendation to people, because you want a good handle, at least a beginning handle on the whole Bible, right? The whole Bible, and then you can start to narrow in and specialize and so forth. All right. What other questions have I missed? Yeah, Romeo says we're just too lazy. That deserves to be put up on the screen. We are too lazy. Okay, so Thought Decoder says, James Dunn argues against reading the pre-existence of Jesus and the angel of Yahweh as Jesus in the Making of Christology. He claims Paul taught Adam Christology and angel is Gabriel in Luke. Okay, so here's a couple of problems. I keep hearing Unitarians say this, by the way. This is really funny. Let me tell you something about my strategy. Some of you have seen me debate. When I debate, it's kind of like, if you've ever seen the movie Over the Top, remember when he goes to arm wrestle? Sylvester Stallone goes to arm wrestle. He has his hat on, and he turns his hat around, and he says it's kind of like flipping a switch. He's getting in the zone, right? Well, when I debate, something changes in that moment, in a sense. Ultimately, I believe the Spirit is with me in those encounters, but I go into it believing that this is a life and death struggle. The person I'm talking to is a person whose eternal destiny is on the line, and other people that he could potentially corrupt, or who have been corrupted by this idea, their souls are on the line. And so I go in this to, I hear people say I'm not trying to win a debate. Well, I understand what people mean by that, and in a sense, I agree. I mean, I'm not in this to, exalt myself or anything like that. I'm not in this to for anything along those lines. But I most certainly am in this to vindicate the truth of Christ. I most certainly am in this to refute the unbeliever, because I believe their very salvation hinges on them believing the truth about Jesus. And if they don't, they're going to be lost. Okay. So as far as my strategy, though, usually what I do is I go in, if they watch this, they'll learn something of my strategy. I go into these Unitarian forums and I'll make a comment or two. I won't really, they'll try and get me to argue back and forth with them. But usually what I do is I say, I don't really like arguing online. It's a waste of time. I'd prefer to just tackle an issue in a debate and be done with it. Because if you leave a comment on Facebook, think about it, folks. For those of you who spend hours arguing with people on Facebook, I'm not saying it can never be legitimate, but if you do it too much, I would highly encourage you to get away from that. But think about it. The time you spend there on this individual is going to get buried on Facebook. That post is almost never going to be seen again. But if you were to write a blog post about this, somebody could potentially see this again. You could potentially reach 100 people as opposed to 5 people on that Facebook post. You could potentially reach people years down the road. Not so with that Facebook post, which is going to disappear beneath a deluge of other posts in the coming days. So anyways, I'm getting far afield here. If what I do is I go in there, they try to engage me on these topics, and I never give them my answer because I want them to come to the debate and have to give me an answer on the spot, right? I have learned over the course of engaging non-Christians that the more time they have to think of excuses, they will. Okay. Jehovah's Witnesses will go and talk to their leaders to find an excuse around believing what they ought to believe. Okay. Now, I believe you can refute the excuses that they're given, but my point is, why give them advance time to make up excuses? Okay. So just strategically, if they're not prepared, they should be prepared when they come to a debate. If they're not prepared, I'm not going to tell them in advance what my refutation is going to be. Okay. So here, yeah. So here, Thought Decoder, first point. He claims that the angel in Gabriel or in Luke is Gabriel. Okay, so what? In Luke, it mentions an angel, and his name is Gabriel. It does not say the angel of the Lord. Okay, Luke does not say the angel of the Lord. Okay, in the Old Testament, you have a particular construction, Melach Yahweh. Okay, you have two nouns, Melach, which means messenger, angel, and Yahweh, which is a proper noun. Whenever you have two nouns in construct and the second noun is a definite noun, or in this case, a proper noun, the name Yahweh, then it's a construct relationship, and it always means that the entire phrase is definite. It means not an angel of the Lord, but the angel of the Lord. Okay? That's true in every occurrence of that phrase. Melach Yahweh always means the angel of the Lord. Okay? In the Old Testament, you'll never find that phrase in the plural. You'll never find the angels of the Lord. Okay? It never uses that expression. Okay? You will find the expression angels, but never the angels of the Lord, because that expression is always singular. There's only one who bears this particular title. Okay? He is a distinctive individual. Okay? Now, secondly, what's interesting is you can say angels of God, okay, not the angel of Yahweh, but angels of God. And here, it also distinguishes between the angel of God and angels of God, because in the case of Elohim, it's not a proper noun. So when it wants to talk about the angel of God in the singular, it always says Melach ha-Elohim, the angel of God. But when it talks about the angels, it drops the definite article, which means angels of God, not the angels of God. So there's just a consistency of usage in the Old Testament that always distinguishes the angel of the Lord or the angel of God from angels in general. The angel of God is repeatedly and exclusively identified as God. Angels are never identified as God, okay? So when you go into the New Testament, number one, you have to remember Greek is a different language, okay? Greek is a different language. But the fact is, it's always an arthurus in Greek, meaning it doesn't have the article, okay? In Greek, it would require the article in order to be equivalent to the Hebrew expression. You'd have to have, ha, angelos theou, or angeluth theou. You'd have to have the angel of the Lord in order to make it equivalent to the Hebrew expression. Now, you do not find that in Luke. Okay, Luke, in fact, there's only one time when the New Testament uses the phrase the angel of the Lord. Okay, now here it gets a little tricky. Okay, the only time is in Matthew 1:24. Okay, and it's not Jesus there. I'll admit that. But here's the thing. Remember, I said Greek is a different language. The only reason it's articular in 124 is because it's anaphoric, which means it points back to the prior reference where it had reference. Let me give you an example. If I say, I went to the store and met a man, the man said to me, you need to take those bags outside, right? Notice that I switched from saying a man to the man, right? I went to the store and met a man. Okay, that's because I'm introducing you to who I'm talking about. You don't know who it is yet. You don't have any idea. When I say the man, it's referring back to the one I just mentioned, okay? That's why you have it used that way in 124, because it's anaphoric. It's pointing back to the prior reference, the one just mentioned, okay? That has nothing to do with the Hebrew expression. The Hebrew expression is not anaphoric. It's not pointing back to a prior reference. It is emphatic. It's definite from day one, from point one in every occurrence, okay? So it's a very different thing going on in the Hebrew than in the Greek. You do not have an equivalent rendering of it into Greek. So done is done, okay? Done does not know what he's talking about here. I actually had Carlos Xavier quote done to me the other day on this point, trying to say that I'm wrong because Dunn, who is a scholar, actually disagrees with me. Well, in the first place, I don't care if he disagrees with me. I don't let scholars dictate to me what I believe. I don't care who they are, right? I do respect scholars. I learn from scholars. But if the word of God persuades me otherwise, then I stand with Luther and I say, unless you can convince me by the Bible and sound reason, then here I stand. I can do no other, right? My mind is captive to the word of God. Okay, that's the first point. But secondly, Dunn is not an Old Testament scholar. Okay, you have to be careful when people play these games and say he's a scholar, therefore he's an authority on this subject. Dunn is not an Old Testament scholar. He does not have some kind of trump card when it comes to what the Old Testament teaches. Okay, he's not an Old Testament scholar. Besides that, Dunn is not the only scholar there is. He's not the only scholar there is. Scholars do not uniformly agree with each other. The value of scholars is that we expect them to at least be familiar with the information, okay? But we don't necessarily have to agree with their reasoning. In fact, we can find their reasoning to be flawed, okay? It doesn't matter to me if I would expect a scholar to know, let's say we're talking about somebody who's a scholar of American history, okay? And the scholar says, here's the fact. George Washington was the first president of the United States, right? But then the scholar goes on to say George Washington was a very arrogant guy because he wore a wig, or something like that. He might have the fact right that he wore a wig, but I don't have to agree with him when he draws the conclusion that he was arrogant, right? I could disagree with him. I could say that's fallacious reasoning, right? He'd have to give me good reason for believing that. And if he doesn't, then I'm not obligated to believe it just because he's a scholar. He has to have good reasons just like everybody else. In fact, that's what it's supposed to mean to be a scholar, that you have good reasons for why you believe this. And so, whenever somebody quotes a scholar to me, I say, don't quote for me scholars, their conclusions, quote for me their arguments. Show me their proof. Show me their evidence. That's what I want to see, okay? So that would be my answer to that. Dunn is wrong. And he's also wrong when he says that Paul taught an Adam Christology. He's not wrong to say that Paul thought of Jesus as the second Adam, right? I'm certainly not denying that. Jesus is the second Adam. Adam represented all of humanity, and when he fell, we all fell in him and with him. All mankind has incurred guilt and is liable to judgment because we fell in our father Adam, right? In Adam's fall, we sinned all. That's what Paul talks about in Romans 5. And Jesus has been appointed the second Adam, right? He is the head of a new humanity. Those who are united to him through faith in him now partake of his righteousness. Just like we lost righteousness through Adam, we are clothed in the righteousness of Christ. We are given his spirit and enabled to now pursue holiness in the fear of God. That's true. But what Dunn means by an Adam Christology is that Jesus is nothing more than a second Adam. He's the equivalent of Adam. as if he couldn't be a divine person in the flesh. I would reject that. I would reject that entirely, and I do so on the basis of Paul's teaching. All right, so Chaldean says, please answer. I saw the big bold, please answer. I debate every time with a JW. I prove to him the angel of the Lord is God, but he points to Luke 2:9 and says, general angels omit God's glory, therefore it doesn't matter. I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. He points to Luke 2:9 and says, general angels omit God's glory, therefore it doesn't matter. I'm not sure I understand the argument. Can you rephrase that for me, Chaldean? Yeah, while I wait for Chaldean to rephrase that, here's Cherokee's good observation. That's why scholarly submissions are peer-reviewed. Everyone, even scholars, have a predisposed philosophy, as do the historian. Always look at the evidence. That's right. Very good comment. Okay. So did Chaldean reword his question? Or actually, Chaldean might, or Cherokee Gypsy. I can't, just so you all know, my eyesight's not the best. That's why I'm going like this and looking at this, but I can't, the picture is blurry next to your name, Cherokee Gypsy. I'm going to assume, are you a lady? You are a lady, I think. And all right. Okay. All right. Just making sure. My eyes are a bit blurry, but Chaldean here doesn't have any picture next to him, so I don't have to wonder if I'm seeing him accurately. That looks like a man figure. Okay. If you go to Luke 2:9, it says the angel shown God's glory. So he was trying to prove agency. He says you can call angels Jehovah because in Luke 2:9, God's glory blasts through them. Well, that's just, I mean, that's a non sequitur. None of the angels in Luke 2 do not call themselves God, right? Not an individual angel on that occasion, nor the angels as a group. They do not call themselves God. You never have an angel identified as God in Scripture. It's only the angel of the Lord. And when I say you never have an angel, and then I turn around and say the angel is, remember that I've made the observation the word angel doesn't mean a created heavenly being. So you always have to take the word in its context, right? The connotation of the word depends on the context. So with the angel of the Lord is called God. In fact, the angel calls himself God. The angel is called God by the prophets. The angel is called God by everyone who encounters him. The angel is called God by God himself. When it comes to angels in general, like Gabriel or Michael or any other angel that's mentioned in Scripture, they never identify themselves as God or Lord. They're never identified as God and Lord by others. They don't call themselves God. Prophets don't call them God. The people who encounter them don't call them God, and God doesn't call them God. So there's a marked difference between the angel of the Lord and created angels. Simply to say that angels, come and the divine glory attends their coming isn't sufficient to warrant, overturning the uniform usage of Scripture. Right? They're not called God here in Luke 2:9. In fact, notice what it says here. It says in verse 8, in the same region, there were some shepherds staying out in the field and keeping watch over their flock by night. And an angel of the Lord suddenly stood before them. So it's an, not the angel of the Lord. And the glory of the Lord shone around them, not through them. And they were terribly frightened. But the angel said to them, do not be afraid, for behold, I bring you good news of great joy, which will be for all people. for all the people. For today in the city of David there has been born for you a Savior who is Christ the Lord. This will be a sign for you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger. And suddenly there appeared with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host praising God and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace among men with whom he is pleased. When the angels had gone away from them into heaven, the shepherds began saying to one another, let's go to Bethlehem, and so forth. So you notice here, number one, the angel who first appears is called an angel, not the angel of the Lord. Secondly, the glory of the Lord shines around, right? The angel comes, and then the glory of the Lord shone around, not simply the angel, but the people. It says it showed the glory of the Lord shone around them. And then it says that a whole multitude of angels appear, and these angels give glory to God. Notice again, not only do they not call themselves God and are not called God, and God doesn't call them God, but they direct praise to God. The angel of the Lord does the opposite. He calls himself God and he receives worship. So when they bring up examples like this, they're really only providing a foil for the claim, right? They're providing a contrast that we can use to demonstrate that the angel of the Lord is in fact God. All right. All right. Well, folks, I hope this has been a blessing to you all. It is getting late. I have extended beyond my normal 1.5 hours. So I do think it's best if I conclude here. That way my kids can get to sleep. But I do hope this was a blessing to all of you. If you missed anything, if anything was too fast, go back through it or bring your questions next time. Again, I thank you for watching. I am blessed to be a blessing. And I thank those of you who do support me through Patreon, because that does help me to have some more time to do this sort of stuff. In fact, I have to make a video for David tomorrow. I'm hoping to make it tomorrow. But we'll see. It's going to be a video where Yasser Qadi helps me expose some of the theological holes in the Quran. You all know that Yasser Qadi has exposed the holes in the narrative of the Quran's transmission. I'm going to show that he also points up theological holes without even trying to. All right, so good night, everyone. God bless you. Thanks again. It was a pleasure serving you and blessing you. Yeah, Cal, one thing real quickly. I thought of making an origami Quran. Oops, I missed it. I got the wrong comment. I thought of making an origami Quran and just leaving it in the background without saying anything of the Quran as a pig. But, you know, the reason I didn't, you're roping me back in here, by the way. The reason I didn't is because I was appalled when David tore that page out of the Quran and chewed it. Not because I care about the Quran, but because it was a Yusuf Ali version, right? A Yusuf Ali version. If you know anything about Yusuf Ali's version of the Quran, you know that his commentaries his commentary at the bottom is pure gold. He makes a number of devastating admissions that are very useful in refuting the Quran. Now, you can still get some versions of Yusuf Ali's Quran with commentary, but the problem is some of it has been sanitized. Some of it has removed offensive elements, right? He was a Muslim, but he makes too many devastating admissions, and so a lot of Muslims have taken out some of those offensive elements. And so when I saw David do this, I was thinking, why didn't you grab a trashy Quran? You know, why didn't, I mean, they're all, you know, the Arabic, the Quran itself is trash, but I'm saying, why didn't you take a copy of the Quran that isn't so useful as Yusuf Ali's? And so anyways, I was going to do an origami Quran, but I now have to go buy one that I can tear and turn into a, Yusuf Ali turning over in his grave. So I have to go find a different Quran. I've got like, you know, actually, well, if I used one of these, I have, I've got at least 10 Qurans down there. But these Qurans, this is the same Quran. These I get when I go to the mosque. When I go visit a mosque, they give me these Qurans. But I think these are too small for me to do a good origami Quran. Oh, plus they're not in Arabic, right? You need the Arabic to make it really hit home. So, but I got other translations here. Here is Ahmed Ali's Quran. But see, I don't want to tear this one up, because this one, if you look in Surah 354, for example, Ahmed Ali is one translation of the Quran that is actually honest when it comes to verse 54. In Surah 354 of the Quran, it says, the unbelievers deceived, and Allah did the like, and Allah is the best of deceivers. Okay, so you don't get too many Muslims who will give you an honest translation about Allah being a deceiver. So, just I got to get another Quran that I feel like I can tear up. But all right, thanks again, folks. God bless you. I pray that the Lord will bless and keep you all, and make His face to shine upon you, and bestow His grace and peace upon you. All right, God bless everyone.